Hello, welcome to another night of Pop Culture Minefield. This is a very special episode because, well, gosh, oh golly, it's about Blade Runner, my single favorite film of all time. And I want to point out we have an illustrious dais tonight. The black gentleman next to me is my partner in crime, Keith Moncrief, co-host of Pop Culture Minefield.
Hello, everyone.
Next to him is the single oldest Blade Runner fan in the world, and my friend Gary Willoughby, who took over Blade Zone when I stepped away in, I think it was 2001 or 2002, when I gave it a quit. And then below us here, we have Katie Haber, David L Snyder, Vicky Rhodes, and some guy that we found named Paul Sammon. He's a beach bum. Living down in Florida, he's a beach bum. And we're going to talk about the greatest sci-fi film ever, and the film that was voted by both the British Film Institute and the American Film Institute as the single most influential film of the 20th century, Blade Runner. And these gentle folk worked on that film. And Katie, in many ways, I've said that you were kind of the backbone of the production, because you were on pretty much everything you worked on.
I was in at the beginning and I left. I was the last to leave. By the way, in your titles, I noticed the only full A is in Blade Runner. All the rest of us have only an upside down.
It's a different font. For our
A. I thought that maybe Blade
Damn
Runner.
it, she would catch that one thing.
No,
But
actually, Pat Smith also had a full A, but the rest was, all of us didn't have any A's. We just had upside down V's. That's all.
I love the fact that you witnessed some of the stuff, including, like a lot of people don't know, that our late friend Morgan Paul did the voice of Harrison Ford for the first trailer. He was the narrator. You were there for that?
Yes.
What'd you think of that?
What do I think of it?
Yeah, how did you think his Harrison Ford was all that good? Because I didn't.
I think it was just a matter of who was around at the time. I don't think it wasn't any underlying motive for it.
I would agree with Katie. I was around at the same time, and it was a matter of expediency.
Yeah, exactly.
Harrison wasn't available.
Harrison wasn't available because he was still working on Raiders, I think. And Morgan's always available.
The only voiceover that Harrison did was with Bud Yorkin and me when we did the voiceover for the first cut, for the original cut, that he did really badly because he didn't.
Was that the first work print, or was that a different cut?
No, that was the original. And Harrison hated it and didn't want to do it, and he did it badly, but Bud Yorkin still used it.
Well.
And Ridley called it Irving the Explainer.
Irving the Explainer. Oh, somebody just popped in. I'm going to bet it's Sean.
I know. Yeah. I'm trying to figure it out.
There's Sean. Hi.
Hey, Sean.
Let me hang this up. Okay.
She's on a call. Wolf.
This light is very distressing. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, Sean.
So right now we're talking about early stuff here, and Paul was explaining that he was there for the Morgan Paul reading as Harrison Ford for the first trailer.
Oh, hi, Katie. I'm still like getting I don't have my glasses near me, so I'm still trying to see who's here. All righty.
Vicky Rhodes is here.
See you.
David L Snyder, and of course to your left there is Paul Sammon.
Mm-hmm.
And up on the top right there is Gary Willoughby from Blade Zone.
Hello.
And then the guy in the middle is a black guy I met on the way here, and he said he'd do the show. He's my best friend and partner. That's Keith. Keith Moncrief, everybody.
Hi, Keith.
Nice to meet everyone.
Hi, Vicky. Oh, Vicky. Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Mary.
God, how long has it been?
It's hello.
Yes.
Yeah, and I found out the other day that Mary, Sean Young, and I have a connection, that she works with my current boss, Dale Dye.
Wow.
because I do a lot of work for Warriors Incorporated, and I'm their lead artist and do all their production art and their books because they have a publishing division. So it's like, holy crap, yeah, because he wrote Firebirds. What's that?
He was on Firebirds. He's quite a character.
Yes, he is.
He was, he made his second career, his first career.
Yeah, he's but anyway, Katie, let's go back and start. We're going to move down the panel. So let's go to your first day working on Blade Runner. What was it, and what did you do?
My first date was, it wasn't a date, it was a day, but was when Mike Keeley and I received the screenplay from Brian and Hampton Fancher.
And what did you think of it when you read it?
Well, we loved it, and that's
it was Dangerous Days at that time, right?
It wasn't even. Was it Dangerous Days? Yeah, I think it was Dangerous Days. Yeah, it. That's when Michael and I were still at EMI Films, and that's when Michael decided to leave EMI and produce what was to be Blade Runner.
How is Michael? Where is Michael?
Michael lives in Santa Barbara.
Oh, that's nice. And how is he? He's got to be in his 80s now, right?
Oh yeah, very much so. And he and Ruth are still playing tennis, and
and glad to hear that.
They live in
he's
a
quite vital. He's quite.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So, David, now on to you. What was your first day? And how were you hired to work on the film?
Well, let's see. I was offered the job sometime in the spring of 1980, and I was at Universal, and I was production designing a film called Zoot Suit. And so,
man, Keith and I love that movie.
Yeah. So Larry called me.
Almost?
Yes.
I said, I'm not available, and so then the actors went on strike, and they shut that picture down, and everything else at Universal, like The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, Henry Bumstead, Bob Boyle. We were the only three people left, and then they shut down production on everything, including television and features. So Larry called me and said, I think, you're ready to come. I said, no, I'm going to find a job to not be your assistant anymore, because he is my mentor. So then I started the pilot for The Greatest American Hero, and then they shut down. So then Larry called me again, and finally my family said, you have to go to work. You have to go to work and make money. So what I did was I went in, and Larry introduced me to Ridley. We went into his office, and he introduced me to the boss, and he said, Ridley, this is David Snyder. He's going to be the art director. And Ridley stood up and shook my hand. He said, too bad for you, mate. And that was the end of that meeting. That was my first day.
David, sorry to jump in, but I was very close friends at that time with Eddie Olmos, and you're talking about Zoot Suit, and I recommended Eddie Olmos to Ridley, and Eddie came into to his audition with already having wrote city speak, Hungarian mixture,
German, Hungarian,
and Spanish.
Japanese, and Spanish, just
which
amazing.
was actually based on David Peoples' experiences in the Philippines, riding around in jeepneys and listening to Tagalog, which is a mishmash of Chinese, Spanish, and American.
Yeah, and he also.
I went location scouting with Eddie Olmos and the director and the producers of Zoot Suit, so I knew him months before we both wound up on Blade Runner.
Exactly.
By accident.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Was Ridley always going to be the director?
No.
Who was going to be the director? Oh,
Robert Mulligan at one
Robert
point.
Mulligan was the first choice.
How did it come to be that Ridley took it?
Well, but Michael offered it to Ridley, and then he said no, he was doing Dune. And then so we started talking to Robert Mulligan, and Robert Mulligan, went through various and sundry screenplays, and he also wanted Dustin Hoffman to play the lead role. And
that's even in some of the production art.
Yeah, and there was very conflicting ideas that were going backwards and forwards, and then all of a sudden Ridley's brother died, and Ridley went on this panic journey of not wanting to stop working, and he called up Michael and he said, "What about that project that you want me to direct?" He said, "I want to come on board," and he came back,
Didn't his younger brother? What was it? His middle brother or older brother? Because
his older brother died.
But
Tony didn't die until much later.
But
yeah, Tony.
Well,
that was such a shock when Tony took his life.
I remember Ridley telling me about the other brother and that he had sold a property or something like that right when his brother had died. But he's got two brothers that committed suicide, doesn't he?
No, the one brother committed suicide, which was Tony.
Yeah, the older brother died from prolonged illness.
Frank was the older brother who died, and he in many ways was Ridley's. Ridley grew up in a matriarchy. I mean, Ridley's family was really run by his mom.
Yeah.
And brother Frank, the older brother, had been in armed services and was a military type of person, and suddenly got skin cancer.
Yeah.
And it was very unexpected, and it really hit Ridley hard.
And Ridley was very, very, very scared about getting it himself. He was always covering his head and all the rest of it.
Yeah, man. But back to you, Vicki. How were you hired on the film, and explain to people what your job was on the set?
Okay. I came in 2 weeks before production started, and I was in a program called the Directors Guild Training Program. And just a little backstory so you know what I had to do to get into it. So the year that I took the test, 2,000 people applied, 1,500 people took the test, 105 people were interviewed, and 21 were accepted into the program. And I was one of the 21.
Mazel tov.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And of the 21 that were accepted, only 3 had taken it only once, and I was one of those 3.
I thought I took that test. I wanted to get into being an AD. I took that training test, and I thought, oh my God, this is really hard. They had math questions in it, and I was like, what? It was not an easy test.
It's about 8 hours of a battery of tests all day. When I got to the end of the day, I thought, if somebody asks me my name, I'm not going to know what it is. And so I had just done, we got in, and that's when the actors went on strike. So when I got onto my first show, which was Whose Life Is It Anyway with Richard Dreyfuss and John Cassavetes, it was pushed because we had to wait till the actors strike was over. So I went basically straight from that to being assigned to Blade Runner. And I had told the administrators that I really wanted features. I'm a graduate of USC's film school, and that's what I wanted to do. And so they tried to make sure that I stayed in features. And they said, oh, well, this thing looks pretty interesting. We'll put you on that. So my job, I was doing on-the-job training to become an assistant director. But when I came in, Newt Arnold was the first AD, Don Howard was the key second. And they said, when we get larger, when we have more people, we'll have more ADs. But you are number 3. So you're high up on the
food chain
of importance. So
Do you-
I was very happy to be in that position, and especially in a film such as this, which was just mind blowing every day.
I want to know if you recall that Ridley always had instructions for me to stay in the little dressing room.
Yes.
And I wasn't sort of allowed to come out. And Vicky was my eyes and ears so that I could actually escape the box. And there wasn't a bathroom in the little boxes, right? So my plausible deniability for being like, made to stay in my little box was that I had to go to the restrooms. And she would let me sometimes use her radio so I could like look around, give me an extra radio so I could like check in on everything that was happening at the Burbank studios. That box got really monotonous after a while.
Well, I'm sure. Jeez.
It's just like a little house that's 8 feet by 8 feet, and there's nothing in it but a little couch and a little desk.
Yeah.
I hope an air conditioner.
By the way, Vicky, I'd already worked with New Donald with Sam Peckinpah on a film called Killer Elite. And I've got this
one of my favorite films. I've talked to you about this before. I love that movie.
And I've got this wonderful picture of Newt and Sam and I on this camera car with everybody on it, and he was the assistant director. So
I
remember
Newt. I just really, really loved Newt, and he was really concentrated on making sure that I learned the right way to do things, and that was you don't scream at people, you don't yell at people, you do. Oh, I love it.
Hold on, let me enlarge your image there. There we go.
There's Newt on the far left.
Yes.
And Sam is on the chair, and I'm sitting next to him as usual. Walter.
I love it.
Walter.
I love it.
And
That's the day.
This is wonderful. That's Phil Lathrop, the cinematographer.
Oh, I love it.
So I've been there, done that with Newt.
All right, before I get to Paul, I want to point out that we do have an audience, and I want to say hello to our chat. The chat is pretty much all over the world. We've got Jermaine Plunkett is watching right now. She is, of course, a huge person in the Blade Runner community.
Hi, Jermaine.
Hi, Jermaine.
Hi, Jermaine.
Mike Arthur is the one who got me in touch with Vicky.
Hey, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Hojo is here. Someone with the name Friend is present. What kind of name is that? Vince Ruffalo is here. What's up, Vince? Deleted Scenes, whose real name is Steven. Jacob the Critic is Jacob. He's a friend of Keith's and mine from Springfield, Missouri. Dus Wolfen. I love Dus Wolfen because I always say, hello, Dus Wolfen. Would you like to touch my monkey? Hi, Dus Wolfen. His real name is John. I like doxing him. He's another close friend of Keith's and mine. Let's see. There's got a lot of people here. G-Star. Goodness.
Dork Knight.
Dork Knight is here. He's a close friend of ours.
Can we see it? See the list, or there's no way to do that?
If you're in StreamYard right now, if you look to your right, there are icons. One says comments. If you click on that and it becomes blue, it will open up the chat and you can see the chat of what they're saying.
I see it.
And Mike Arthur said something about how dangerous Vicky is because she knows where all the berries are hidden. Where all the bodies are buried, I mean, sorry.
I like berries are hidden.
What berries?
Did I say berries?
Bodies.
Look, man, I'm apparently high right now. I meant bodies.
Vicky's got all the strawberries.
It's not just Katie having trouble talking today. It's me too. I'm so starstruck with Katie. Just so you know. My God, I had a crush on you when I was a kid. It was really bad.
Whoa.
And then later I had one on Sean when Blade Runner came out. My crush on Sean was so bad, I married a girl that looked like her.
Everyone had a crush on me in that movie. I hear that over and over again.
It was bad. I was pathetic. I was your typical good-looking young 18-year-old guy. But anyway, Infomedia Live is here. They're a great follower of the show. We have regular fans. Oh, our producer is in the chat, Pat S. That's Pat Smith. He's why we are able to keep the lights on. And let's see. Who else? Peter Vinkman fan site, a really good follower. Zach's, a.k.a. Kyle. Kyle, we hate Kyle. No, he's a great guy, good friend. Mr. Angel. Are you spotting anybody else? Also, Martin, why aren't you in here? I sent you the link so you can join and manage the chat. You man.
The lovely Six.
Oh, Six is here. Hi, Six. I'm looking for more. Oh, John, who you all met earlier, is in the chat. Parrothead is here. He calls me a geezer because he's a geezer. And he's another military vet like myself, which is why I'm always wearing my military hats. One of those proud veteran guys. Anyway, I was a combat medic. I was called what you call a pacifist. Or not a pacifist, a conscientious objector. It's like...
so they put you in the medical section?
No, I signed up only to be a medic. And my recruiter got so angry at me when it happened because she's like, your score was high enough to be a pilot. And I'm like, is it high enough to be a medic? And she says, yes. Okay, that's all I want to be. And she's like, why? And I said, because I don't want to kill people. I want to help people.
Right.
And I'm a patriot. All right, Martin is here. I'm going to introduce you real quickly. This is Martin Acosta Santana. He is of Venezuelan royalty. No, he's not. And lives in Mexico, and he is our chat manager. Wonderful man.
Thank
Martin.
you.
Hi, everybody.
Yes.
Fuck off now. Go manage for me.
Back to the left.
Thanks for your help, Martin.
He is a great guy, dude. He really, really helps me a lot on our show. But I got to tell you, people are really. We got a lot of people watching right now, and there's a lot of activity because of you guys. Just letting you know, everybody's been looking forward to this night. They didn't know who I was going to get on the show. And I said, you're not the only one. I have no idea who's going to show up. I don't know what we're doing. But when I heard Katie was available, I got so excited. Sean, of course, I was so happy to get back in touch with you because you and I hadn't talked in 22 years.
Long time. Yeah.
Yeah. I had more of a relationship with Rutger. And this is the next section of the show that I really kind of want to get into.
Should
Best
I wait
memories.
One second.
Wait,
should I
Paul?
go make a sandwich or?
Sure. I want to know the behind the scenes stuff that Katie and all the people behind there.
May I just say that as someone who actually knew Philip K. Dick and had his ear to the ground from 1973 when I first met him, that I had heard about the initial efforts by Scorsese and Jay Cox in 75 when they tried to make it. I had heard about Mulligan, of course, and when I first met Katie and I first met David and I first met Vicky, I remember it all very well. And I also have my own Newt Arnold story. Newt had an eye patch, and he had also directed a film that I'd seen when I was 12 years old in South Carolina. He directed it. It's called Hands of a Stranger, and it's a contemporary remake of The Hands of Orlac, which was a silent film.
Yeah, because I know that film.
Yeah, exactly. And
I don't know
Mad
the other,
Love
the remake he did.
Laurie, it's called Hands of a Stranger from 1962.
All right,
when
I
I
go
first
find
met
that movie.
Newt, I shook hands with him and I said, "Hands of a Stranger," and it took a second for him to, and he was just shocked that anyone had even seen that film. So that's my Newt story.
Well, I do want to jump into this one thing, which is we lost Rutger. I really liked Rutger a lot. And I love saying that his humor was everywhere. And even in his freaking email, because his email was Fartvilla at AOL. I'm not worried about doxing it because what's going to happen now. And just he would tickle me with his little messages. He was such a sweet man. Anything that Gary and I ever asked to him, he did.
Yeah.
He also scared the shit out of Ridley when he first met him.
Yeah, because of the Elton John thing.
That story. What happened?
Well, I have to take credit for the fact that I told Ridley that the only person who could play baddie was this guy who was in 3 Paul Verhoeven films, Katie Tipple, Soldier of Orange, and Turkish Delight.
Turkish Delight, yep.
Yeah, and that was a fabulous film, Turkish Delight. and his name is Rutger Hauer. So Ridley watched all films and he said, yes, it's great. And he actually cast him from those films. And the first time he met Rutger was Ridley rented a house up on Doheny above Sunset when he first met him. And Rutger came to the house and to meet Ridley. And it was just me and Michael and Rutger and Ridley. And Rutger walks in and he had already cut his hair short and made it spiky the way he had it in the film. He wore this huge white, but it wasn't huge, it's just that Rutger was huge. He was just a big Dutchman. And he had this Kenzo sweater, which was a very thick knit sweater. And it had an applique fox that sort of went from the left shoulder down across his chest. And the fox had two red sort of ruby eyes, inserted into the face of the fox. And he was also wearing a pair of bright pink.
This is what I remember reading.
Shantung pants. And when I tell you that Rutger was large, he had a huge ass, but it wasn't fat. He was just big.
Just thick.
These Shantung pants were huge, and he walked in.
Yes, his hands were big, very big.
And he walked into the room, and
oh, great!
Yeah, he walked in, and Ridley takes one look at him, and then he looks at me, and he turned absolute white, and he sort of went like this to me, and I got up, and we walked outside into the other room, and he said, "What the fuck have you done to me?"
Oh, put that back up, Paul.
Oh, okay, sure. That's Rutger and I on stage in London at the British Film Institute in their Blade Runner Day back in 2009.
I've got a great picture of you and Rutger in my living room. And
I remember that. There's a funny story there. If you
let me finish my story.
Sure.
So
Believe me, I haven't said
"What the
much
fuck
of
have you
anything."
done to me?" And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "He's a fucking woofter." And for those of you who don't know what that means, a woofter means gay in the English language, or some people call them in English woofters or poofters.
Poof, right.
But he said woofter. And I said, "Oh my God." Oh, no, I forgot he was wearing bright, shiny Elton John glasses as well. And I said, "Really, he's having you on. Trust me. He knows who he's playing. And he just wanted to scare you." He said, "You better be fucking right." I mean, really was just, he thought, "Oh my God, I've hired this 180 pounds, 6 foot tall, giant gay man to play Daddy." And it was all my fault. He proved him wrong.
That's kind of odd, isn't it? I mean, I guess Ridley was more naive than he gave the impression of at times.
Well,
I've always taken it, and Katie and you and I talked about this, that he really wasn't an actor director.
No, he was not.
No.
Not at the
And
time.
it was also the times, the period was a bit, it's 40 years ago, folks. And, there was a certain kind of attitude that perhaps was more prevalent, a certain kind of ignorance that's not around as much today. Can I just, since someone skipped over me, how I actually got involved in Blade Runner? Because
No, I meant to come back to you, and then
I
let's
know.
get
I'm
it,
looking
buddy.
at the clock, guys.
Hit it.
Okay. You have to forgive anything I say. I've been on a road trip for 30 days. I've been away.
You're old.
I've
You're
done
cranky. It
3,000
happens.
miles by myself. I've done 7 states.
Wow.
And I'm in northern Arizona. I'm not even sure where I am today, but here I am with you. So that's the important stuff.
Amen.
I had, as I said earlier, and I'll make this short, I had had my ear to the ground through Phil Dick about how this project was, kept mutating. And when I found out it was actually really going to go, I lobbied both Cinefantastique magazine, which was a really good film magazine back then, and also Omni magazine that I would love to do what you would now call being embedded with the entire production. And that really hadn't been done before, not to the extent that I was going to do it. And they said, well, if you can get yourself a contact. So the first person I contacted on the production was Michael Beale, was Mike. And this was when they were in Gower Gulch, Katie. You remember, the old offices there, Brighton Beach Productions?
I remember they were my offices.
Absolutely. And I came in, I arranged a meeting, and he said, well, who are you? And I had like a carry-all bag, and I'd been writing furiously through the 70s to support myself and my wife. And I dumped all these magazines on his desk. And I said, that's me. And he kind of smiled, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I very briefly explained that I knew Philip K. Dick, I knew the novel, I knew Ridley's past work. I also knew Paul Verhoeven. This is later down the line. But anyway, I said that I want to cover this film, and he said, well, go in and talk to Ridley. And Ridley happened to be there that day. This is very early. Ridley had literally just been hired. And supposedly Ridley and I were only going to speak for about a minute or two. And we honestly wound up, it was either 2.5 to 3 hours. And I cannot remember. But people were really angry because Ridley's time was being taken up. I do remember that. And we talked about everything except the film. And I immediately kind of got Ridley. Ridley was one of those intense, incredibly determined and dedicated people with like this blowtorch focus, And we just got along. And next thing I knew, I had a letter, which I still have, with the Brighton Productions logo on it, from Michael saying, this is to introduce Paul Sammon, who has what they would now call total access to our production. And next thing I knew, like big chunk of my life went by. Because I was also working at Universal Pictures at the same time. So I was not sleeping for months. We did meet. All kind of, you just don't remember me. You don't even remember me from Dune. And
what are you saying, Sean? He's not memorable.
I would say that was my general lack of interest in all things, but it's not personal.
I never took it personally.
I remember that Harry Davenport introduced.
I remember you used to tap dance. In ward.
Yeah, my boredom. This is what we do as actors. We're such slaves, or incarcerated beings until the thing is over.
Well, apparently you were in a box. So
a box. Yeah.
She was.
According to you had a little golf cart,
right?
So you were on Dune. Wait, Paul, you were on Dune, and that was after that. But where did I meet you on Blade Runner? When was that?
I think it was like one of your very first scenes. It must have been in Tyrell's office. It was kind of like a hi, how are you type of thing, and that was early in the production.
Yeah.
You had a mustache back then.
I had hair back then.
That was such a new experience for me.
Yeah.
So I don't.
But it was wonderful. No, and I remember things were already getting a little strange very early on in the production.
Strange how, in your opinion?
Well, David would know because Ridley flipped the columns in Tyrell's office, and that caused a problem.
Yes.
Right, David?
Yes.
Well, let's get into that, David. What was that about?
Well, first of all, what I want to say is that when I started on the show, we were at Sunset Gower, which Katie remembers. And we were financed with a company called Filmways. And what happened was because of the budget, I think at the time it was like $19,600,000, Filmways jumped off the project. And all of a sudden we were in turnaround, and everyone was let go except the art department.
David, actually, Filmways went bankrupt. It was nothing to do with the budget. They went bankrupt and they pulled out.
And remember this: Filmways was the company that brought you the Beverly Hillbillies and Green Acres. That's where they were. So at the time, the entire pre-production was being financed by Michael Dealey and his associates. So the art department stayed on because they knew that all of the designs and all the drawings, which had to be done by hand, We had no computer, no Photoshop, no computer generated design work.
No, we did it by hand back then.
So we all stayed on, and we were in the art department was in Rita Hayworth's old dressing room in the dressing room building. And so we were all there, and we stayed there until I believe Katie will confirm when the Ladd Company came along and decided that they were going to make it part of their output deal at Warner Brothers. And that's when Katie asked for all the files to be sent over from Sunset Gower. And they did. They sent all the cabinets, but what they did was they dumped everything that was in the cabinets in the trash and sent the empty cabinets to Warner Brothers. So all of the early paperwork on that film has been lost forever.
But what was interesting is how, and I have to laud the praises of Michael Dealey, how everybody was still on payroll while he was reconstructing the whole financing, and the financing ended up being the Ladd Company, Run Shaw in Hong Kong, and unfortunately, the completion bond guarantors was Bud Yorkin and Jerry Perenchio. But he put that together in less than 14 days, and nobody went off the payroll, even though Filmways went bankrupt. It was a very expert and brilliant piece of work, and Michael Dealey was absolutely brilliant in doing that. But you're right, everything in the filing cabinets was thrown out, and we had to start again with everything.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Jerry, can I ask Vicki a question?
Sure.
Really
Of course.
I remember, Vicki, that Harrison used to play jokes on you. Didn't he used to play practical jokes on you?
Yes. I was as with Sean, I was the person that they would send in for the actors to keep them sane. And Harrison, once I'm supposed to cue him to go into the next scene. So we're standing there, and then he turns around and he looks at me and he says, "You're in my eye line." And that's very important. You don't want to be where the actor is going to be looking when they're concentrating on their scene. So I took a few steps back. He took a few steps forward. So now he's still the same amount of space away from me and says, "You're in my eye line." So I back up 10 feet. He walks 10 feet. "You're in my eye line." We go into the next set, has a desk. I run behind the desk. And he leans over the desk and says, "You're in my eye line." And I start running across the stage. He starts running across the stage screaming, "You're in my eye line, you're in my eye line." And then on the radio I hear, "Hugh Harrison."
Hugh Harrison.
I'm like, oh crap, we are nowhere near where we're supposed to be. So they're like, "Hugh Harrison, where's Harrison? Cut. What's going on?" My radio. Wasn't me.
Technical.
Yeah, I remember Harrison was funny. He could be very funny.
Oh, very funny. I have a question about Harrison. Can anybody give me insight why he disliked me so much? I just could not figure it out for the whole 4 months. I was just like, why? Why does he dislike me so much? Because he clearly didn't like me. Any insight from that time back then? Because I've always been curious.
Well, first of all, he didn't like Whitney either.
And he was doing a lot of coke at the time too. I think that's.
Well, I'm going to point out, and Paul, you'll appreciate this. He is the one person I have never sought to interview from Blade Runner, and people said why, and I said I've heard how cranky he is, and I'm cranky, and I could just see that interview going really badly.
Well,
he's mellowed now. Like I saw him, and he was really nice when I worked for a small amount of time on 2049, and he was super, super nice. I mean, it was like, I guess age has mellowed him quite a bit. But
All right,
also,
I'm going to go ahead and tell this
Can
story.
Can
I lived
very
on the same
briefly,
block as
because-
Harrison
very
Ford as a
briefly-
kid.
Very briefly,
Oh, wait, what,
because
Paul?
Harrison, although he was flinty with some people and other people he did not like, he and I met on the set, not through the film, but through literature, because he's a reader and people don't know this. And I was carrying a book around. He recognized the title. We started to talk about books. And from that point on, he was always very relaxed with me. I mean, I've spoken with him numerous times over the years. And the last time, in the longest interview that we did, when we were at his office in Santa Monica, he did about 2.5 hours. And how to say this? I guess that there's something about him that if he is approached in a certain manner, like a lot of major actors and stars are, he will kind of like back up, and the shutters will come down, right?
Yeah.
Right, Vicky?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I found him kind of goofy. In
Yeah.
a way. Yeah, and he was kind of fun-loving, and he's highly intelligent, and we would just chat. And
well, it does show you first impressions are important.
yeah,
I mean, I got off
maybe it
to
was
the wrong
that.
start with
Maybe
him,
it
and
was
we
that.
were able to fix
Yeah.
the system. You know, it was
Talking about Harrison, did anybody notice or know last year or the year before when he gave at the Academy Awards, he presented the editing award, and his opening speech was he started reading Bud Yorkins and Jerry Parenchio editing notes on the first.
I remember that.
The first cut of the of Blade Runner, and I mean, and those notes were not attractive at all. And when he started reading them, I mean, I have those notes, and I can show them to anybody. And
were they like Harrison's not looking right, or were they like?
No, this movie does not cut together, and every time I see it, it gets worse. And I mean Jerry Parenchio's notes were without fail scathing, and that's what Harrison read out like 2 years ago at the Academy Awards for the editing award.
Well, this brings us, because we're coming up on the last 17 minutes of this segment, and I want to make sure to get some questions in, but I want Gary and Keith to say something, because they are so politely quiet over there in their windows. But my last question before I throw it over to Keith and Gary is, look, the film has gone through so many transitions, including that debacle release in '92 of what was the director's cut, and not a fan of it. And but because of that film, it led to the accidental release of the work print I think it was at the Egyptian, as well as up in Washington too. There's a Seattle theater that accidentally showed one of the work prints, and because of that, all this stuff came to a point in around 1995 where I finally broke down and built the first real fan site. And of course, I stole completely from Paul Sammon, because he had the best damn book out there, the Blade Runner Bible. But Gary Willoughby stepped in, I think the first year, stepped in to help me build it, as did some of the other guys, which will be on the show later. But the fact is yes, that's the version I had. That's the print I had. And I'm like, who's this Paul Sammon? And what does he fucking know? Oh, he knows a lot. And he inspired me to make the website. And it's so funny. I secretly added him as one of the editors on the Blade Zone Facebook page. Nobody knows that he can go in there and add stuff. They have no idea it's him. But Paul, I want to thank you, man. You helped us do what we did. And what we did together as a group was create an environment and a community that showed value to Blade Runner to where we finally got the final cut, which is why Blade Zone is and you are so prominently mentioned on the special features of the Blu-ray DVDs.
Jerry, you're very generous and kind, but there's a synergy going on here, because when I was writing the first edition of Future Noir, there's been 3 now. But I was online. I was one of the very, I've always been a tech head, gearhead, techie. And I remember when
You're
it was
a nerd.
Bulletin boards and the very first sites. And then I remember when the Blade Zone site came up, I was so excited about that because I and Katie and David and a few other people were like lonely voices in the wilderness for years in the 80s saying, this is a damn good motion picture. That kind of got thrown under the bus.
It did.
Yeah, and so I kept writing about it. I got obsessed about it in varying publications, which ultimately resulted in the book. But believe me, I was an early.
Why do you think that happened? Why do you think in '82 when it came out, it wasn't originally embraced?
Oh, well, I don't know if you'll agree with me, Paul, but I think E.T. played a huge part in the downfall of both
I
The
think
Thing
so
and
too,
Blade
but
Runner.
let's face it, there was another film that got released on the same day as Blade Runner. It's a little movie that no one's heard about by John Carpenter called The Thing.
The Thing.
And it died
flopped
too.
Yeah,
And
they both died.
Let's just back up for a second. June 25th, today, 40 years later. Is this not the summer? Do you want to go in the summer to the Arctic where it's always dark, with a bunch of mutating creatures? Do you want to go in the summer to a rain-drenched, moody metropolis with this alcoholic detective that shoots people in the back?
If you're asking me, Paul, the answer is yes.
Well, I know.
Yes,
too.
and yes.
Yes. But I'm talking about, I think, it was...
The average
I always
moviegoers,
said
they wanted to see lighthearted, upbeat. Yeah, I get it.
I wasn't. Well, Harrison put it best. He was on David Letterman. He was promoting Blade Runner, and it was just about the day before it came out. And Letterman had seen it, and he goes something along the lines of, "Boy, this is kind of a gloomy movie, Harrison." And he goes, and Harrison's reply is, "It's not a musical comedy, Dave." So I think that it should not have been dumped in the summer like it was either.
Well, how do you guys think the outcome was, though? Because, and I only brought us up because we created that energy for the final cut to be made. And Gary and I were so ahead of the curve because we were hearing everything from Charlie. Deslarica. Charlie Deslarica, Ridley's DVD and producer.
I know. Charlie.
And Charlie, Charlie was a friend of ours, and he was giving us information about what was going on, and we were feeding him information. In fact, I did the introduction between Charlie and Drew Struzan, who did the cover for the Blu-ray, and because it was a phone call, I made the phone call and connected him, and I was so glad because. Don't get me wrong, I've always enjoyed the previous artwork, but Drew Struzan makes a better poster than anybody. And to finally get his artwork on there. But in the long run, everything, it's because of all that stuff taking place around 2000 to the release it later in that decade that we got it included into the AFI, BFI as the single most influential film in 20th century. Because...
it was weird in '82 when the Academy voted for Best Art Direction. Gandhi won for Best Art Direction.
I know.
Yeah, and you got Blade Runner, and it just got snapped.
Yeah.
Let's not bring that up.
Now, David, I do want to ask you a question, and then I'm going to hand the dais over to Keith and Gary, the other Keith and Gary, the other Gary, and. What was it like working with Syd? Did you work closely with him, right?
Syd Mead did not work at the office. He came in for meetings, and as I've said before, he was the primary influence of the way that the design was going to go. So between Ridley's vision and Syd Mead's skill, they passed all that information on to the art department, and it was our job to realize
interpret it and make it real. Yeah,
and make it real, make it 3D. And along the way, we had to make a lot of changes because Syd's designs were so far into the future. Look, every film I've ever done, maybe 50, they're all compromise. You never get exactly what you think it's going to be. And at the time we were working on the film, although we're all talking about it now, you're too busy to think about whether it's going to be a hit or not. There's no time to think about that at all because you're working in your brain every hour that you're awake. So I would say that because of Syd, the film looks exactly the way it does. And then in the other side of that, it had to be manufactured for the budget. So it was a very difficult but rewarding job. And it was terrifying, you know.
Oh, that's what we were talking about earlier, Katie.
Yeah, and also the fact that we had to give him a non-union title.
Right.
Because that's why, because he, you know, he was not in the union, so that's why we called him a visual futurist.
Right, and also, you know,
designer, decorator, or art director. You know, just we had to come up with something that was non-union.
Syd also.
I remember all that.
Syd had also brought a history with him of love and a real marination in science fiction. I mean, he had met Robert Heinlein and his wife. He was a big fan of Ray Bradbury. He had read all the Golden Age science fiction, so he was a fan. You know, he was part of geek culture before it was called that. But he just, you know,
well, Ridley followed something that George Lucas liked, which was a weathered future.
Yeah,
where everything was warm.
Syd was one of the world's most sought after, you know, commercial illustrators at the
and
time.
He's got a DVD, Syd Mead, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. But he genuinely loved the genre, and so that, I think also, David, you were talking about, you know, his vision, and you know, he brought a lot to the table. I mean, he had already had a whole lifetime of a love affair with science fiction before he got involved with Blade Runner and Tron at the same time.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
God, I got offered Tron and Blade Runner at the same time and went, no, Blade Runner.
Yeah.
That happened right at the same time.
Wise choice.
Really?
Yeah. It was weird. I mean, and you make these choices and you don't know how it's going to turn out. You know, you have no idea really when you're, well, a young actress and all that. You know, you just make the best decision you can make and listen to your.
It's a flip of a coin. But Keith, do you have a question, my friend?
Yes, I do. I'm going to try to make this quick because it's daunting with the panel that we have. I have to say this is probably one of the most impressive, not the most impressive panel I've ever been on. Honored to be on with all of you. My question is, now that it's been 40 years, are you able to look back and feel a little differently about the entire production, or is there still some painful things that come through, or some of the difficulties still kind of fresh for you all these years later? And this is for all of you.
I'll go first. I'm quick. I just wish Ridley had hired me again. I was always very miffed by that. I was like, why has he never hired me again? And I you know, I have my own theories, but that was one thing I always wished, and I was kind of always waiting for it too, but that was not to be.
Wow,
Katie.
I thought I have the luxury of being the objective observer, so the pain that I saw was secondhand. You know, the crew. There's a whole chapter in my book called Blood Runner, and that's what a lot of the crew people called the film when I was out there. And it was tough. I mean, on the other hand, as a producer friend of mine says, they're all a nightmare. And they usually can get very intense and really crazy productions. But Blade Runner is, in my mind, 40 years on, and it doesn't seem like 40 years ago, was so unique, and everything came together, including all the negative energy, to produce something like we're talking about 4 decades later.
And there is a life of its own. Something in some films, I mean, you get on a certain film, you know, if it's a clunker and you're like, oh no. But when you get on a good film, you can feel it. There's a kind of you can't really define it, but there's a feeling that starts to build.
Well, when you see the hard work of David and his team of making these things happen visually, it must have been amazing to walk into those sets.
I remember Harrison's house. Did you guys do that with a Franklin Lloyd Wright design? Was
Yes, yes, it was.
Yes.
Yeah. 'Cause I
Franklin
remember,
Lloyd Wright, the building, and then we just to build the interior to match the exterior of the existing Frank Lloyd Wright building.
It
yeah.
was like somebody had bought the Innes Brown house and decided to turn it into a tower.
There was a house on the Hollywood Hills for the Hollywood sign that was a Lloyd Wright. And I remember thinking, David,
The Ennis house.
told
It was
me that? Yeah, somebody told me about it, and we drove by it.
It's the one thing when I went to LA last that I didn't go by because there wasn't time. But I did the Blade Runner tour. I went and hit every spot I could, including the Bradbury.
It was also the Ennis Brown house was also the titled star of William Castle's House on Haunted
That's
Hill.
right, House on Haunted Hill. At least the exterior, not the interior.
That's true.
It did not match. It didn't match.
in answer to your question, Keith, what I carry with me always is the pain and suffering that Michael Dealey felt for what Bud Yorkin did, and I'll never ever forgive him for that. Ever.
What happened? Tell me what happened.
He fired everybody when the film.
Oh,
when we were shooting,
Mike was fired.
No, when we were shooting the last 2 weeks of the film, and the Directors Guild strike came in, and so Ridley decided and Michael decided that we were going to shoot the last 2 weeks in 1 week, and we would shoot around the clock, and because it was day for night, we rolled the rooftop set onto a closed set and worked 24 hours a day one whole week. We went over budget by $5 million, at which point Bud Yorkin and Jerry Perenchio, who were the completion bond guarantors, took over the picture, fired Michael, Ridley, and everybody, and except for me, because they needed continuity. And
Yes.
and I never, ever, ever forgive Bud Yorkin for what he did. And not only that, with taking over the picture, they took over the sequel rights, and it was Bud Yorkin who produced Blade Runner 2029 or 2029,
Right.
without Michael or me, of course. And then there is some resentment, from Michael to Ridley, because Ridley turned around having being fired by Bud Yorkin, and Michael stood up for him and said, "You've got to go to the Directors Guild, and you'll find out that he can't do it, and all the rest of it." And then Ridley, went with Bud Yorkin, and Michael was completely left out of the sequel.
Well, it's no surprise. Ridley takes care of Ridley, and he always has.
Yeah.
Well, let's move to Gary because we're running out of time. It's almost the end here. Gary, I'm sure you have a question or two.
Well, it's just a pleasure to see everybody here all at once, right? And I enjoy all the films. I try to get out at least once a year to see Blade Runner in the theater, because that's seeing it on your iPhone or I've had people comment about Blade Runner after they've seen it on their laptop or their computer, and it's not the same. It's not the same film, right?
It's screening in New York tonight at the rooftop theater.
It comes up. It comes up at least once a year, maybe in Los Angeles.
I have to wait for the next anniversary from Warner Brothers here in Missouri, because that was the last time I got to see it on the big screen, when the 75th anniversary. And I don't know. Did you go to that, Keith? Because I went up there with some of the guys from VisionCon.
No, the only time I've ever really seen it on a big screen was one of my first times in Kansas City, and it was the very first weekend ever that I had ever been to any kind of convention, and I must say it captured me. It changed how I thought about film up to that point, and because of Blade Runner, I went on to other films like The Hustler. And went on to films like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and it just opened up an entire door of understanding film better, rather than just mindless, being sitting there mindless and enjoying the entertainment. It became an experience, and all of you, I really want to credit you with doing that for me. So thank you.
And I want to thank you guys for coming. Thank you, Katie. God, it's so good to see you again. David, it's really nice meeting you. I've never met you before, and
I've been hiding from you.
You've been hiding from me. I'm going to track you down and get you on another show because
that's right. I want to talk
Vicky,
to you.
You too,
sir.
Young lady.
Yeah,
because you've got a story I want to hear more about. And
I think we should have all of them back on.
Well, Katie knows that I want to have her back, and Sean, I want to have her back on the show too. But until the next anniversary, we're not going to do a group thing together again. I was really sad that Joanna had to do her show tonight or play, but because she would have been a great addition to this dais. And Paul, you're pretty much in my daily life in a way, so I'm blessed to have you in my life.
Thank you.
Gary too. But you guys, I want to thank you for being here. Katie, you in particular, there's so many things I wanted to go over with you tonight. There's just not enough time.
Mm-hmm.
And because you showed me something today I really wanted to talk about. There's just no time to talk about it.
Should I put it up on the screen and leave
Please do. Please put this up there. I'm going to make you center screen because this blew my fucking mind. Leave it to Katie to be the one to blow my mind.
Of course.
Look at this. Look at this.
This is the treasure.
Uh-oh.
Oh my
Hold it up a little further
Hold it up.
to see what's on it.
Oh, sorry.
There you go. That's
There you
okay. There you
Wow.
go. That's the original.
Oh my goodness.
Wait a minute.
You got to tell real quick. Tell how you got that because that's a fucking great story.
Oh, good Lord.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
that is gold right there.
Hey, Katie, lock your doors.
I told
Lock your
Katie. I
doors.
said, "Hey, Katie, go ahead and go on eBay and use the name Beatty Cater." Sell it.
Do you think I can retire on selling this?
You can definitely retire on that. Oh my God.
Yes.
It says Vangelis 4-track stereo, ISP Dolby tone, and then it's the opening shot at home, Journey to Brian, Rachel Seam, all the scores, and it's original music, Dolby NR, and the dated 11/2/82. Tales.
And this was handed to you.
This was Bud Yorkin and myself. We were the only people there, and the technician, and we were laying down the music tracks to the first print. And this is it.
And they never remembered to get it back from her.
And as I was walking out of the building, the technician handed it to me, and I thought, oh, okay. And I still have it.
That's a story to end on right there, my friend.
But the thing is, you know what? I'm sorry.
Oh.
But the thing is, that there was never. Vangelis never did a soundtrack album for the film because he was so pissed off with Ridley because Ridley kept cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, so that every time he wrote something and he had to stop and he refused to do the soundtrack album. And the album that came out was with the Jack Webb,
American Orchestra. And
Jack
the guy
Webb.
from Frank Zappa, the keyboardist from Frank Zappa, was the keyboardist on the album.
And that's the only soundtrack album. So I would
official.
be
That's right.
I would be terrified to put this on some
I'm going to fucking have a heart attack laughing if you do it.
Put up the soundtrack album of this, which you can do.
Oh my
Listen,
God.
Vangelis made the movie so much incredible addition to the whole effort. May he rest in peace. He's
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, and I do want to bring up another person real quick, Douglas Trumbull, who we lost.
Oh, I know.
And of course, Jordan Cronenweth.
Jordan, and I wanted to talk about that because he was already sick while working on Blade Runner, and a lot of people don't know that.
Misdiagnosed.
You know what Ridley called him? The Prince of Darkness.
What a great son, and his son followed in his footsteps. A very good cinematographer himself. But again, I want to thank all of you for being here, and I'd like to have you back again for another Blade Runner reunion in the future. But Katie, thank you so much. You're a godsend.
Oh,
David, I'm so happy I got to meet you, and you too, Vicky. You are gonna be back on this channel. I swear to God.
Yes.
I want to have you back on. Sean,
I
of
have
course.
one more thing to say. You were asking about, 40 years later, how is the crew? And I said, it's very, very difficult when you work on a film because you don't work in order and you have everything. You're thinking of all the stuff, all the crew and the equipment and everything. And one day we were shooting something and it was raining and we were all soaking wet. And we turned to each other and we said, one day this will be funny, but not today.
Well, God bless all of you. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to move on to the next segment. So you people are welcome to
bye, everybody.
Say goodbye. And everybody loved having you here. I know everybody.
Next.
I've been reading the chat and they've been going nuts.
See you all.
See you in a couple of days, Katie.
Paul, you stay.
Please come back. Please come back.
Katie, God bless.
Just
I'll talk to you later, David. And bye,
Bye.
Vicky.
Bye.
Nice to see you all.
Pleasure meeting you, man.
Can I click on Leave Studio?
Can you what?
Can I click on Leave Studio?
If you don't know how to do it, I'll do it for you.
There's a little red cross that says Leave Studio. So
yes, that's the one you want.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you later, Katie. God, what a great show, man. Man, Paul, I'm so grateful to have you in my life.
Oh, well.
I really am.
I don't know. I think you love Katie a little more than you love me.
Look, man, I have a crush. I have had a crush on her since like the 70s when I first saw a picture of her. And I'm like, she's a knockout. And it wasn't until Sean Young that I developed another crush on someone in Hollywood. But Katie was
she's way out of your league, dude.
Oh yeah,
way out of your league.
And she takes the time to talk to me. Is I'm so lucky, so lucky. And she is still gorgeous. She says I'm not. She's gorgeous. Man,
Ridley used to say that she looked like she was fresh out of the vat. As a replicant.
You're right. Just too perfect. But I'm going to go ahead and say now that we're going to invite some of our friends here from the building of the community, and we're still seeing growth. But what's funny is when you interviewed Gary and I for the English edition, the one over in the UK, you remember what I said to you about fans of Blade Runner? It was so easy to spot us because we weren't dressed like anybody. We were dressed like we just came out from work.
Yeah.
That's the old way. And then after that interview, everything changed because of the final cut. Mm-hmm. And the final cut, all of a sudden we started seeing Blade Runner being shown everywhere. They started doing that show that they do all over the planet where they set up a cityscape, make it look like Blade Runner, and then they show the film. And it's really fucking crazy how it's grown. It almost annoyed me, though. The first time I started seeing Blade Runner cosplay, I was annoyed at it.
Well, I was going to say, cosplay really exploded. When in the early 70s, when I really started to get into going to cons, back 50 years ago, the costume, or as they used to call it, the masquerade, you hardly saw people in costumes walking around the halls. Very few people. And there was this explosion of cosplay over the last 20 years. And I've seen so many different presses, I can't even keep count of how many of that particular character from Blade Runner.
Yeah, that is like a favorite. I've seen that one. Yeah. Roy Batty. But some of my favorites are these guys that went out and didn't buy the coat. Mm-hmm. They actually produced their own trench coat. I saw one of those at Dragon Con in Atlanta. Somebody had made their own coat. It was amazing.
And isn't it Profiles in History that has Deckard's shirt up for auction?
Yes.
Like today or something like that? Soon. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, already it's like 50 to 70K as a starting bid.
Wow.
So
I
break
think this
out
is
the
funny.
events.
Someone named Richard Deckard is in the chat. Greatest panel on
Whoa.
PCM
Hey,
ever.
Rick.
Now, I want to welcome my good friend Nathan. You guys have met him before. He's actually
Hi,
been
Nathan.
on the show.
Hey, Gary and Keith and Paul.
Hey.
I
Hi,
had
Nate.
your what was the magazine that came out before your book? It was Video.
Oh, Video Watchdog?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I heard about you first. I had that.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
Ian Sutter.
Hey, Ian,
He's
how
some
are
crazy
you?
Hey, guys.
Scotsman
That's me.
that I met along the way that apparently loves Blade Runner.
What? Blade Runner?
It's a wee little film that I like. Shut up, Gary.
Wrong show. Wrong show.
No, if he's Scotsman, I would say my name is Jetty. Right?
Yeah, that's right. It's Jerry. But it's Jerry. I know it's Jerry. I know.
Because my business partner, Paul, is from Inverness. And he's the only person legally allowed to call me, because he's my partner, legally allowed to call me. But Aaron is here. Oh, where are you? There you are, Aaron.
Hey, Aaron.
Now, I wish that Patrick was going to be here. He told me in advance that he probably wouldn't be able to make it. He is my faux frog friend that did a lot of special effects for TV. He worked on Beast Wars, got a lot of stuff. He's also the first CG animator to make an animated spinner.
Oh,
And I was hoping he'd be here, but he told me he was probably going to be busy. Family stuff. He's a dad now.
He made an awesome
So
spinner.
we know now that Patrick knows how to have sex. Nathan, I already knew with your red hair you're going to be dangerous in the bed, so you got kids.
Spinning spinner. I did one in 93, I think, but it wasn't nearly as good as Patrick's.
Really? You never told me this.
It was a 2D thing. It wasn't even 3D. It was 2D stuff. So
Yeah, but you never told me this. I wish you told me that. I would have.
we'll share it at some point.
And now Aaron was a Blade Runner fan that I met online, and he loved Blade Runner so much that I had to invite him to join us and help me build the site. And he did a lot of neat stuff early on. And my favorite thing, and I brought it up earlier, was when I introduced him to the cast and crew that were here, was that he set up our website. Blade Zone was connected to a massive network for SETI. We were helping send stuff out there. I don't know how they did that, how it worked, but I was so tickled when you did that, man. I really love that. Do you remember doing that?
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we've got a big delay with poor Aaron. This will be a fun segment. But now, Ian, you're in Scotland right now, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it is what is it, about 3 o'clock in the morning?
3:20. Yes.
Wow.
And I bet it's still daylight.
Oh yeah. It
That was the thing that freaked me out my first time in Scotland. We got there at 1 o'clock in the morning and the sun was still out, and I'm like, "What in the living fuck is going on?"
Yeah.
And the only thing open was an Indian restaurant.
Yeah, I'm in Shetland, so I'm as far north of Scotland as you can go without reaching Norway or the North Pole. So and it's daylight.
So you
all
are
the
a
time.
true Highlander.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, I spent most of my life in Inverness, where you're talking about, but right now, as I say, I live in the Shetland Islands, so 200 miles off the coast of Scotland.
So I want to point out here that right now, this dais are people who are involved directly with the continued growth of the Blade Runner community, which is so important. And Jermaine, I wish she was going to, she chickened out, man. She
did.
Out. But we love you, Jermaine. You're in the chat. I hope she's still in the chat.
Yeah.
And she gave me some information, so I'm going to read hers. And there's another person that couldn't join us, is Craig Chicoine. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name. I've known him for years. And Craig also sent me some information. So let me read from Jermaine. Jermaine says, Ian Souter introduced me to the fandom for my favorite film, which I found visually, orally, philosophically, and spiritually unmatched. My background is in film and television, design, like Charles Node, and I studied at Wimbledon. And though my husband, who worked for Dolby Laboratories Film Sound, I have a particular love for poster art. So I joined Blade Runner Art, Fashion, and Photography just after its inception in 2017, started by Alfonso Dorado Redondo. And I've talked to him before. Sharing my love of Blade Runner with the people who love these movies as much as I do, helping the group grow in around 15,000 and making so many good friends has been very special. I'm continually astonished at the creativity both films continue to aspire. I'm rereading that. Sorry, it jumped. At the creativity both films continue to inspire. The wealth of talent amongst the members, the artists I am privileged to know, and the support and generosity from people who were part of that moment in time when all stars were aligned. So that's Jermaine. Thank you, Jermaine, for sending that. I wish you had the balls to be on here today, because I think you're wonderful. I think she's
I do
really
too.
wonderful.
I agree.
Yeah,
she's one of my dearest friends, and what she does for the community, she does far more than I have done. I honestly believe she's just a power.
Well, she told me that too. She told me that you didn't really contribute much.
Yeah. No. Seriously, that woman is amazing. She's amazing.
Yeah, and she single time I bug her, she shies away.
I was lucky enough to meet Jermaine in October of 2019 in London, when the Royal Albert Hall had a screening of Blade Runner, and we all went, including
wrong month, man.
And Ivor Powell and I.
Oh,
and
was he there?
Her companion.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we all went together. And it was a very unusual screening because they had stripped out Vangelis's score, and what they did was they performed it live.
Oh, that must have been weird.
That was wonderful. They actually did a really nice job of it. Yeah.
Oh wow!
I've forgotten the name of but they if you're in London, apparently they do it often there. They'll take a film and they'll just do a
live
a live sound.
Wow!
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Neat.
But Jermaine, it was really wonderful meeting you. If you're still out there lurking, I just want to say, from me too, as a you could call me an old Blade Runner fan, still hanging in there. But as somebody who's been watching and lurking around for a long time in all kinds of different media and watching it grow, we all owe you a lot as well.
And they are, Ian included, is really part of the new movement. And it's not.
Too,
but
Ian.
I will say this:
mean
it's not like the
out.
baton.
Too.
Yeah, it's like the baton isn't handed off by us, because Blade Zone still exists. It exists, but we don't really promote the shit out of it. We just do it, and it's out of love. No money has ever been made off of what we do. But I love the fact that you guys keep that going on Facebook. And it's why I went ahead and created a Blade Zone page to directly connect to Blade Zone so people would funnel to it. And but it's still, the numbers are really good with bladezone.com. But it's sort of sad, because I remember back when something would happen related to Blade Runner and every magazine in the world would fucking approach us. Remember that, Gary? Now
we had people that wanted to buy Blade Zone for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000.
And what was the words? Fuck off, I think were the words.
Yeah. And we had one guy that tried to siphon off our content and create another Blade Runner website, and we stopped that. So in the early days, it was like a knockdown drag out, So
it was the Wild West at that time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I've said before many.
By the
times,
way, Paul, this is to you.
Sorry, I've said before many times in the Facebook groups that
my thumbs up.
They wouldn't exist without Blade Zone.
That's Jermaine.
No, I know.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I'm stepping.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ian. I was just making sure Paul knew who that was.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Continue. No, I was saying the Facebook groups that I started, they wouldn't exist without Blade Zone.
You guys have really been kind about that to
it's
sort of like we wouldn't exist if not for Paul, and you guys gave us credit that it was because of us you went off to do the things you do, and we love that. We love that it's all one big family. We're all about keeping Blade Runner alive, because I remember this fucking conversation with you, Gary Willoughby, when we were sitting there, and Gary goes, "Wouldn't it be funny if we're still doing this in 2019?
That doesn't sound like me at all.
Yeah,
much less 2022.
My name is Gary. Your name is Gary. I love Gary Willoughby quotes, man. I've always said this, and I mean it. I've been very blessed to be around a lot of you fuckers. And when I say fuckers, that means I fucking love you. That is how I express love. Is when I call somebody a fucker, that means you're my friend. And I only call certain people that, including Nathan Cheever, that fucker. And you're some of my oldest friends too. It's really odd. Nathan, I couldn't stand you when I met you. Just kidding. I loved you.
We're about the same height, so
yeah. Well, I love that because there's that photograph of us together with William Sanderson, and he bought my book for some reason. I'm like, you don't have to buy my book. And he goes, no, I want to buy your book.
Yeah.
What a nice guy, huh? Bill Sanderson.
Yeah, and I need to talk to you, Paul, because we've been trying to figure out, because he's in Pennsylvania now, and we're trying to figure out how to get him on the show. They don't have, he and Sharon don't really have much technology there at the house.
Well, yeah, does he want to get on the show?
He does.
Oh, okay.
Sharon would love to be on the show with him, because I love Sharon. She's such a sweetheart.
Yeah. They're both very nice people. Yeah.
Oh my God, they're wonderful.
Yeah. Pennsylvania is Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania. I was born in Philadelphia.
My family's from Pennsylvania, the Cassells.
Yeah. Well, my father was from a little coal mining town called Avoca, which is between Scranton and Wilkesboro. And and my grandfather on my father's side was a coal miner who died of black lung when my father was 11 years old. And on my mother's side, my maternal grandfather was a truck driver who deserted his family when my mother was 15 and ran away with the Italian widow across the street. So I got an interesting, genealogy going on.
Wow.
And with all due respect, Ian, I'm fourth generation Irish. So we have things in common.
Ian knows this. Ian knows this. Hold on, I'm going to say this. Everybody knows that the Scotsman is just an Irishman that never learned to swim.
Oh no!
I don't think I'd say that in Scotland, Jerry.
I have said it in Scotland.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
The other thing I've said in Scotland was I said one of my other favorite Scottish jokes, which is the Irish gave the Scottish bagpipes as a joke, and they still don't get it.
Believe me, I've heard all the Irish jokes.
Man, there are great Scottish jokes on the Irish too, man.
I love the UK. I mean, I started when I was very poor and I was in my 20s. I first got into London and started to hitch around and bum around and went to Wales, went to Scotland. Spent some time all up and down England, and I'm an Anglophile. I always have been, But
me too.
Scotland
I lived in South
very
Molden.
Distinctive character. I was at Hogmanay, Ian, in 1979, and I have never seen such 3 days of debauchery in my life. I thought the Australians were bad.
Well, let me tell you something. In 1977, when I went there the first time, I was there for the Teddy Punker riots, and my first experience, I was on my own. I was 13, on my own in the subway down in the underground, and all of a sudden I looked to my left outside the train on the platform. There's a bunch of Teddies beating the shit out of a single punker, big ass fucking mohawk the size of a shark fin. And they're beating the shit out of him, just wailing on this guy. He gets away from him, runs as the doors are closing. I think he waited for that moment. Made his way through the doors closed. They left him. he sat catty corner to me, and I'm like, I was fucking terrified. I'm just sitting there with my mouth slightly agape and my eyes wide open, just looking at him. And he looks over at me and he goes, "Hello." That's all he said to me. And I went, "Hi." And he's just pouring blood. And that was the craziest shit I ever saw. And, but, you know, then I lived in Ireland too. Because I lived in Dublin and stayed with the Dicks. I stayed with a family of Dicks. And they liked it so much, they asked my dad if it was okay if I stayed. And I became an exchange student without doing the paperwork. It was great.
So you were an honorary Dick?
What? Yeah. I like the Dick's daughter. She was a hot Dick.
So we were talking about Blade Runner, I think?
Yeah, no, not really. No, but let's go back to 82 because, well, we can go all the way back to 80 when they started production, which was in January, right? Or was it spring?
More or less. Yeah,
more or less. Because they were building up the pre-production, and they still hadn't cast Harrison Ford yet.
But just to put it on pause, see when I say more or less, because I think of, you know, talking to Hampton and Brian and Michael Dealey when they're in the late 70s, they're working on the script and trying to get the deal together. So in my line, Blade Runner kind of straddles the new Hollywood of the 70s in a way. It's like Alien a bit, because if you look at Alien as kind of like a crossover between the blockbuster 80s and the new Hollywood, where it was very individualistic kind of filmmaking and very idiosyncratic. There's a mix in both Alien and Blade Runner. And in Blade Runner's case, it really did start in the late 70s, because that's when they're actually doing the writing and trying to get the packaging together. And then when they get into production and prep, that's an 80. But to me, it always started in the late 70s. That's where
that's interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, you're probably the best person to talk about this too, Paul, was the decision to go with the name Blade Runner and its association with Blade Runner, a movie, which was supposed to be a movie, but became a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, it was Andre Norton had done a book. And it was a future society where it was physicians were sort of like gorillas and hidden, and they were called Blade Runners. And William Burroughs was actually given money by someone to turn that book into a screenplay, which he never really did. He kind of took the money and ran, and God knows which vein that money went into. That was a not so subtle reference. But long story short is eventually that got published as Blade Runner, a novel. And Hampton was told that basically Dangerous Days wasn't flying. And by the way, for everyone's knowledge, the very first draft was called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep.
So they went with that. Okay.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
But for a very short period of time. And I think they also ran into, I'm going to suspect that there were rights issues involved with the title as well. Who knows? They bought the book. The book had been bought. But on the other hand, Dangerous Days wasn't flying really. And it was a desperation move by Hampton. Hampton's well-read. And he actually had the book, and he pulled it out and brought it in and said, well, why don't we call these guys Blade Runners? And Ridley said, oh, fucking genius. When Ridley says fuck, that's a good sign. Especially back then, like fucking hell, or like fucking A, or, it was, that was a good sign. And I think that's what Hampton got when he brought in the whole Blade Runner, idea.
But Mike, that was a really good question. Hold on, put that back up there.
Paul? Yes.
I wonder if they considered Dustin Hoffman because he was a runner in Marathon Man, during which Zell tried to slice him with a blade. Is it safe? That's right. Mike Arthur, of course. Mike.
No, of course I know. Hi, Mark. And these comments have been popping up, and I'd love to reply to. Someone just talked about being Scots-Irish in a mutt, and that's
what I am.
That's Penny.
Yeah. Hi, Penny. And
Penny is Dork Knight's mom. She she watches our show rather than her own son's. Isn't that
Oh,
sad?
well, that's cool. No, in terms of, I honestly no. I think Dustin Hoffman was very hot, and Dustin Hoffman was, like an A-lister. Yeah, one of the things that people, all right, here, let me rephrase this. One of the things that I had to do when I started to get involved in the studio system in the 70s, and especially when I started to work for like Disney and Universal in the early 80s, was the fact of like any romantic fantasy I had about people actually watching other films or knowing characters and stuff like that went right out the window. Because half of the people in the rooms I sat with didn't know their elbow from film history, right? And could care less. It was all about the product. It's all about making money. And so whoever you make money with, you go for the people who are the hottest, who are the name people, who have a schedule open. And Dustin Hoffman was, and, unfortunately he's fallen into, disrepute, as we know. But
and I think undeservedly so for him.
Well, the whole Me Too thing, I'm very much behind. I come from a law enforcement background in the third world and saw a lot of things done to women, and I've seen them done to women my entire life. And when it comes right down to
in the film industry in particular, because there's a lot of closed doors. No, we should talk about it sometime.
Come down on the side of a woman. Because I just saw it in reality so many times. The woman not being believed, and the woman being the brunt of the domestic violence, and the woman being left with the kids, and the woman being the one beaten up and shot, and sorry. So that's me. As you saw, I got passionate.
Wow, way to bring the show down, Paul.
Paul, can I just say that's something else we have in common? Because
he froze.
About 20 years working as a detective.
Am I still here?
Yeah, you're here.
Times.
Okay, yeah. Somebody, Katie tried to phone me.
Yeah, Katie tried phoning you.
I tried to
if you didn't hear what I said, way to bring the show down, Paul. Thanks.
Oh, okay, yeah. No. But anyway, yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why I've always been, not only because I'm Celtic, and we Celts have a natural affinity for the dark, but
you dark bastard.
I also, I saw a lot when I was a kid, and continued to see a lot through my life. And so anything that has to do with real world concerns and that type of thing has always appealed to me, especially if it's cloaked in what Theodore Sturgeon, who was a friend of mine in the 70s.
Are you serious?
80s. Oh, yeah. Ted.
Oh, we need to talk about him because I'm a fan.
Well, Jane with a Y. Yeah, oh no, I was fortunate. I went out of my way to go out and meet my idols. And I met Ray Bradbury, I met Richard Matheson, I read Harlan Ellison, and I edited in a book, an anthology.
Whoa. Harlan Ellison?
Harlan Ellison. It's a collection from 1995 called The King
Yeah,
is
there's
Dead.
actually a really good story here. Would you tell this of how you got that?
Okay, but let me finish the other one first.
Okay, finish the first one.
Because I have a tendency to, you guys got to.
This is ADD theater, Paul.
Well, I'm in the right place. But anyway, Dustin Hoffman was exceptionally hot. And so when he expressed some interest in playing the character, they originally wanted, Deckard to be like, Ratso Rizzo. That was the whole conception.
What a horrible idea.
Approach for Deckard, this tiny, really scruffy looking, really hard-ass, awful kind of guy.
Yeah, that was a terrible idea.
His approach. And then so that the romance that came out of that and the transformation of the character would be really interesting, right? Which is one of the things, unfortunately, I've always felt that, along with Hampton and Katie and Michael Dealey, and Ivor Powell, we were all in agreement that the romantic angle of Blade Runner, which was always very prominent at the beginning, sort of kind of got diluted along the way. And it's still there, but it was much stronger in the beginning, So what was the thing about Harlan Ellison?
You got that short story from him, and I love the little story behind it.
Harlan and I met Harlan in the 70s. As I said, I went out of my way to meet like Robert Bloch, who was a sweetheart, one of the kindest, nicest men you'd ever want to meet. Richard Matheson,
okay,
Arthur
man.
C. Clarke,
We're having nerdgasms now, Paul.
Well, but they were, I was young, and it was a different kind of society back then too. I mean, everything was more closed off in terms of fan culture and, the pros and the fans and all that. And it was easier to get access if you were a little aggressive like I was. And I went looking for them, And then when I was in my late 20s, the first book I did was called A Sense of Wonder. And it was oral histories. It was hundreds and hundreds of pages, and it was bought, and I sold it to Citadel Books, which went out of business not Citadel, Crown Books, which went out of business right after I sold them this. And it was Robert Bloch, Richard Matheson, Harlan Ellison, Forrest J. Ackerman, and Theodore Sturgeon. And it was their life stories. And the reason, the thread was they had both worked in film, with the moving image and with print. And that was the theme. And that's my great unprinted book that I still have, sitting on the shelf one of these days.
Just to let you know, Mr. Angel, we will get around to your question.
70s. And, and I'd gone through with Harlan everything that you went through with Harlan. But Harlan was quite nice with me and kind. But we had a falling out, as he had with so many other people. And it was after The King is Dead. I just I called him up. I did a thing where I got this sort of high-end anthology. And that was in the mid-90s when the Elvis sightings were everywhere. And, Elvis was alive. And I just thought it was so absurd. I thought, here's a good idea. Why don't we do a book where Elvis is dead? And I pitched that. I pitched that to a high-end publisher, and I said, "Here's the theme. I'm going to go out and get a whole spectrum of different kinds of contributors, but they only have to do two things. Elvis has to be in it in some way, shape, or form. Elvis must be dead." And they thought that was very funny, and that's what it is. It's called The King is Dead. I got Lou Reed of the Velvet Underground to give me an original essay, and it's in there too. I got Greil Marcus, the music critic. I got Joyce Carol Oates. It was a pretty, but because it was pitched to more like the Atlantic magazine crowd and the New Yorker crowd, and was not marketed properly, it kind of went poof.
You should make that deal now. With the new Elvis movie in theaters, you should make that deal now.
Well, one of the things you learn as an anthologist, you have a certain shelf life or ownership of those stories. Author's rights, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
I got screwed too many times when I was first starting out. Believe me, I'm all for the creator.
Yeah, I won't talk about it on the show, but I've been there too with published work I've done.
I hate the word creative. People come up to me and say, "Oh, you're a creative." I go, "No, I'm a fucking writer." But that's just me. We got a little more lively when all the A-listers left, didn't we?
Yeah, it does. Because I promised I would try not to cuss, and I did cuss a couple times. I apologize. While the guests were here, from the movie, but I still dropped a couple of F-bombs. It's just the military, man. It's in me. I can't get rid of it. It's
Tell me about it. I grew up in the Navy. Also.
Yeah. So we had a couple of questions that I starred over here. I'm going to put one up on the screen right now. For Paul, was there ever another composer in consideration other than Vangelis?
I think it's funny. Ridley brought up Jerry Goldsmith for like 10 seconds.
Because Jerry ended up doing the original composition for Legend.
And for Alien.
He'd also worked with him on Alien.
Oh, that's right, Alien.
Yeah. And he was also very mad at Ridley because Ridley fiddled with the scores.
Well, this is a complaint consistently throughout time with his composers. He would irritate him.
You walk into the house of Ridley, you just you're going to have to assume some things, And
well, it's as a comparison, Paul, you have Ennio Morricone, who really got annoyed with Carpenter.
Oh yeah,
because Carpenter kept making changes.
Yeah,
and he says, I cannot compose that quickly, And
I'll tell you something. I'll tell you an interesting story that illustrates what happens when you have a director and a composer who are both of equal stature and ego. when I was working on Starship Troopers, I also worked here. I got to show this because this.
And that's where you worked with my boss.
Yeah, well, I sure did. But here's the other 40th anniversary this year, and it's Conan.
Oh my God, that's
Conan
beautiful.
The Barbarian. Yeah. And
I still need to get a copy
my
of
book
that.
came out from Dark Horse in 2007, which is the tabletop. If you want to center screen it, you can still do that. Yeah,
I can do that, Paul. Thanks. I'm so glad you know techie terms like that. I gotta find you. Where are you? There
center
you are.
Screen it, wise guy. Anyway, look. Let's see. There it is. You can still find this on eBay. I don't know why it's this weird angle. Okay, hang on. There we go. It's like a complete illustrated hit. This is hilarious. I really do know where camera lenses are. Hang on. Never mind.
That's great. I know somebody that is one of the biggest Conan fans out there, and we need to have you back on and invite Andre on at the same time.
Yeah, Andre has one of the top shows on that does what we do. They have just a huge audience, and I know they would probably love to get you on their show. And I'm going to tell them, no, Paul is ours.
I worked on Conan the Barbarian for Universal and Conan the Destroyer for Universal. Then I worked in De Laurentiis, and I worked with Arnold on what was the one he did? Raw Deal, and also Red Sonja, and so Arnold and I have a history. And I was a Conan fan because I had read my first Conan short story when I was 9 years old in 1959. And it was one of the Gnome Press hardback cover that L Sprague de Camp did, where they had the original stories and his pastiches. And I read Red Nails when I was 9. That's the last Conan story that Howard wrote, the first one that I read. And so I've been.
And speaking of that was one of the things you were on John's show for, wasn't it?
That's why I'm on the road. I just came back from Cross Plains, Texas for Robert E. Howard Day.
That's right.
Right.
Because that's where you met him, right, John?
Yeah, that's where we met.
Yeah,
right over there in Cross Plains.
I got to interrupt real quick because John's got to go. John,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, buddy. I appreciate it. Even though you don't do a Blade Runner centric thing, I know how big a Blade Runner fan you are, and you are a massive supporter of Blade Runner. And I appreciate you promoting our show today. Dude, tell people where they can find you.
Hey, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is your T-shirted historian, John, and I'm on my channel, T-shirted historian, and you can catch me at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on Saturdays and Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. when we do Dungeons and Discussions.
There you go. Appreciate you showing up, buddy.
Thank you, John.
Beat it, man. Get the fuck out of here.
All right. Paul, it's wonderful to see you again, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
And thank you for that wonderful book and the signing. I really enjoyed reading it, and the history behind it is so great.
I still need to replace mine because mine got stolen. Bastard.
Get the new copy. The new copy's really good.
I got to send it to Paul for him to sign it. Autograph another book for me.
I'll definitely be sending a copy to you, Paul, to sign.
Right. Don't sign Keith.
All right. Take care, everybody. Y'all
I'll see you later, John.
All right.
There's more questions for you, Paul.
Like someone just
because you guys brought that. Well, Vicky told that little thing about getting rained on, but not today. Comment. And from working on that film that Milius, when Schwarzenegger got bit trying to climb up those rocks, and he was pissing and moaning to Milius, and Milius told him, to basically toughen up. It's like, look, man, pain is temporary. This movie is forever.
That sounds like him.
That was the very first day. They were stunt dogs, and what they've done is they had a wolf. That was an actual wolf cloak that had the scent on it, and they had rubbed it with scent so that the stunt dogs would go after it. And the guy who was the wolf wrangler said, "Don't worry about it. They're not going to go after you." And then they just pulled him right off the rocks, and he fell. It's on one of the DVDs, but that's actually that was actually the very first day.
Jeez.
Got hurt on his first day, bit by a damn dog.
Yeah, well,
or wolf.
Conan the Bleeding, you know.
Okay, so we got another one
Back
here.
to the Blade Runner.
Let's see. Dustin was brought in because of Ridley's interest in the film Agatha.
Tom Southwell is absolutely correct. And Tom, I wish you were on this. Tom, of course, was the guy who did a lot of the graphics for Blade Runner.
Tom, you're welcome on. You want to join us in the dais right now to talk?
Well, Tom, but Tom's a great guy, and Tom and I have been friends for a while, and his contribution to Blade Runner was also, quite noticeable and pretty striking. It's good to hear from you, Tom.
And
he continues. Mr. Angel, who's I think he already left, but he says, by the way, best YouTube stream of the year award nomination. So very kind of you. And he wanted to say thank you to Paul earlier. I saw that too. And then the last one I saved was Peter Falk is Deckard.
Yeah, well.
I got another question.
Just one
Mr. Tyrell. One last thing.
Film noir has, especially because of Eddie Mueller and his show on TCM, Noir Alley, which I don't know how many people watch, but they should.
I watch it.
I do too. And, I saw many of those shows at like 2 a.m. in the 60s, on like a local TV station with 15 used car, pitch advertisements. Now, of course, you see them in pristine prints all at once. But what's interesting is that Ridley Scott is a huge film buff. And he doesn't only make them, he still likes them and he still watches them. And I'm surprised. For instance, I was talking about the composer, the guy who did the music for The Counselor, which, by the way, you should watch in the director's cut. Do not ever watch the theatrical cut.
Yeah, that's the version I watched, was the director's cut. The
director's cut is a totally different experience. Totally different. That film is really unjustly maligned. Ridley got like really butchered on that one by the studio. Okay.
Just like Kingdom of Heaven, which you should only watch the director's cut.
That's right.
Yeah, it was again a much different experience when you see the real thing.
And I love the hard work that Charlie puts into some of these things because
Charlie de Lauzarica, Charlie, if you're out there, shout out, man. Also just to let the fans know, I'm doing, and some other people who I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say yet, but we're going to be at the San Diego Comic-Con, and we're going to do a Blade Runner 40th anniversary panel. And also I'm doing a 40th anniversary Conan panel at the Comic-Con.
Because it came out in 82 too.
Yeah.
The four big films from 82 for me was Star Trek Wrath of Khan, Conan the Barbarian, The Thing, and Blade Runner #1.
Oh yeah.
That was the year, Paul, by the way, if you've never told you, I turned 18 and I didn't have to have my dad buy me tickets. I could go see R-rated movies by myself.
Okay.
And I hated Blade Runner the first time I saw it.
Road Warrior was released in the States at least in 82. I mean, 82 is an amazing year.
Oh, it's one of the best years. 84 and 82, two great years for film. But when I went to see Blade Runner in 82, I went to the opening weekend. I went with Jim Woodward, one of the producers of my show. Bennett Sumner, a bunch of my friends from school went to see it. And we all walked out of there like in a daze. Like, that was not what we wanted to see. It was so different. And I didn't like it. And we got in the car and nobody talked. We always talked after a movie. None of us talked. Then we went and bought a copy. Each one of us bought a copy of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. And I read it. And I'm like, oh my fucking God, we got to go back and see it. And so we all went back the following weekend at a matinee, see it again. And we walked out like 16-year-old girls on prom night. We couldn't shut up.
Well,
we finally understood what the film was about.
That's different than my experience, because my experience, first time I saw it, it was a religious experience. It completely changed how I looked at film. And I couldn't watch another movie for months without, comparing it to like, oh, this is as good as Blade Runner.
You weren't hit with the Han Solo Indiana Jones problem, because that's what we went expecting.
No, I wasn't. No, it was.
Gary, what did you think when you first saw Blade Runner?
I loved it.
Oh, that Gary.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
Gary up here. Yeah.
So, of course, I was ancient by the time I saw the first filming in 1982. I think I was like 85 or 86 years old when I saw it.
Come on, man. You were just a grown ass man. Don't. I've told you a billion times, don't exaggerate.
I was looking through, 35-year-old eyes. I had lived my life looking at 1950 sci-fi films that I went to the actual theater and saw.
Me too.
Every sci-fi clean, everything was perfectly clean, and you had marble floors, and you had,
it was an experience.
Ship.
Yeah.
You had Forbidden Planet. Look, if you think about Forbidden Planet, that's what sci-fi was. I saw it the first day that Forbidden Planet came out, right? I did too. Yeah. Stood in line. When I saw that flying saucer, I couldn't believe it. I paid to sit in the reserve seats, which were 75 cents. So the kids wouldn't throw popcorn and hit you in the back of the head, kind of deal.
All right, I like this one. This is Shinatsky. Shinatsky says, Gary, I was confused when I first saw it on VHS, and then I saw it on Sci-Fi Channel and was confused again when the ending was different.
Yeah. Well, imagine, and Ian and Nathan, I'd like to hear what you both thought. But let me say one thing. Imagine how I felt, because I had lived and watched it come together. And Terry Rawlings, the editor, bless his heart, another person who's gone, a really super guy, and also a collector of soundtracks. He and I used to send each other unauthorized cassettes. Stuff.
You're pirates.
That's me. That's my empire. You see my luxurious hotel room, what it's got.
Hey, I want to point out with Terry Rawlings something, and have you explain it, Paul.
I'm sorry.
I wanted you to explain something about Terry Rawlings, because I brought up the director's cut that came out in '92. And the reason why it's not a director's cut is neither Ridley or Terry were involved.
Well, Ridley
is that
was
correct?
Involved. No, Ridley was involved. He fell asleep. He literally fell asleep. The whole idea of that generated because of the screenings that they had in LA. They had accidentally screened a 70mm version of the work print when they were having these.
That was at the Egyptian, right?
No. It was another theater that no longer exists. It was a film festival. Because they turned it into I was there. They turned it into a multiplex, and it was not the Egyptian. And I only wrote the damn book. Here it is again. It's in here where it was.
Right? It's your Google is the book.
Yeah. But anyway, no. And everyone was shocked because it was a completely different version of the film. And that was the one that has the only bit of voiceover narration that's different from all the other ones too. And it comes at the very end when, Batty is dying on the roof, and Deckard says something along the line, I watched him die all night. He fought it all the way. It was a long, painful thing, but he never gave up, something like that, which was actually quite poetic. So that suddenly started this whole groundswell of interest, and Warner Brothers struck from that 70mm print some 35 interpositives and started showing them around the country. And in the famous story being in LA, when they showed it in LA, all the screenings were sold out of the work print, and Hampton Fancher couldn't get in to see his own movie. Yep. He tried. He showed his passport to the boss. He said, "Look, I'm the producer. I co-wrote this movie." They said, "We don't care. No room for you, sir." So because of that, Ridley was in between doing 1492, Paradise, Conquest of Paradise, and Thelma and Louise. And Ridley is he's this dynamo. He never stops, just back like he is now. He's 83, and he's just finishing up Napoleon, and he's going to jump into this 10 episode arc of, Blade Runner, maybe. So he was given the opportunity to go back and change the theatrical cut that came out with the fake shining footage ending and the awful narration. And although a lot of people like that narration, let me tell you, Katie did say something that was not completely correct, because I asked Harrison right when it happened, did you consciously mess up the narration the way that you said it? He said, no.
He didn't.
He said, I read what I was given. And he said, I thought it was horrible, but I did what I was supposed to do. And it was like one of almost 7 or 8 that was done on, a very short period of time. And some of you read the early scripts, some of the voiceovers there are really wonderful. They're actually quite poetic. Like when the blimp goes over, there's one point, one of the narrations in one of the drafts where Deckard says, off-world, boy, they're sure making it sound good, but wait a minute. If something's so good, you want to keep it secret, right? Why do you want to advertise to the whole world to get something in that's...
And they kind of do a variation.
Like,
because they have a variation of it in the original theatrical cut.
Ridley is given a chance to, because of now the groundswell of interest from the 90s screening of the work print, and then it's 91. And he goes in and they run a print of Blade Runner without the narration, with an outtake of the unicorn scene, not the original unicorn scene, but an outtake, because that's all they could find, and no happy ending. Ridley falls asleep in the middle of the screening. He falls asleep, and he wakes up at the end and says, "Oh yeah, okay, that's good," and he walks out, and that's the end of it. I mean, Ridley at that point, this is true.
See, I'd always heard that he wasn't in any way involved. And so you're actually saying he proved
he had to sign off on it, but that was his sign off, basically. Oh yeah, fucking A, that looks good, poor Ridley. But then it came out, and that's why he was unhappy with it, because he now was awake and he saw it, and so it took years, for it to go through the process of finally getting to the point where, it costs money to do these things. And again, the bottom line is the bottom line. And, Warner Brothers was willing to pony up with Charlie de Lauzirika as the Final Cut restoration producer, the time and the money to go back in, pull out all the original stuff, and do what everybody was supposed to have originally seen in 1982, but didn't until 2007.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up in a little bit, Martin, but this is a good comment. I like the narration of Zora being killed and Deckard talking about his wife, talking about how he's covered in blood, and he says it's not blood. Looks like blood to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
Zora was originally supposed to be hit by a bus and killed. That's how she was originally supposed to be killed.
Well, we're coming up on the end of the show. I cannot believe it's been 2 hours already. Wow. I'm enjoying talking so damn much with you guys, and still learning shit from you, Paul. Still learning shit from you. You held out, you son of a bitch.
Well, listen, but since we have such little time, let me just say, I'm a fan, okay? I'm a fan of Blade Runner and a fan of all kinds of different things, and I've got the passion and I've got the endurance for it. But you guys have put fan stuff out there, so thank you from me, thank you very much.
Well, it's you just know we love you. So, but I do have a question before we start winding down, which is, were you there on that last day of shooting?
I sure was.
What was it like seeing Rutger go in his trailer and come out with that whole new rewritten scene?
He did. But Rutger also left the lot during that last couple of days. Everyone thinks that everyone was in lockdown. Rutger is like in his trailer and he's going, "Oh, fuck this. I know this is going to take forever. Can I go? I'm going to go home. Call me." He did. He left. And they called him and said, "We need you now," because those things, all that stuff that Ridley did, it's not, okay, 1, 2, 3, snap, it's all set up, let's shoot it. It took forever to do those setups. And Rooker, you know, at that point, you know, and Rooker was that kind of personality anyway. He's very mischievous, kind of like, people called him Dennis. He loved to screw with me all the time. He just loved it. And I didn't mind because it was kind of an ongoing, it wasn't mean-spirited at all.
Yeah, Harrison messed with Vicky and Rutger messed with you.
Oh, Rutger messed with everybody. It was his character. He liked to, it wasn't testing you. It was so much as like,
playful.
Rooker says in Future Noir in the latest version that he and Ridley had the same characteristic in that they both like to fuck with you. And they like to see if you caught it, one, and two, if you could come back and fuck with them. You know? And so...
Well, I told you, my first phone call with Rutger, he kept burping in my ear. and I just... It would be like, he would be talking, you know how soft-spoken he is. He was like, well, you know, we would... And I'm like, did he just burp in my ear? And he did it 3 times. And I got this image, and I told him later about it. I said, I had this image of you sitting there with your hand down your boxer shorts and a wife beater shirt.
Paul, I can attest the fact that he fucked with everyone, because he fucked with a certain police officer in a small island by riding his bike the wrong way down a one-way street with no helmet, wearing only a toweling dressing gown and slippers in the middle of the night.
Oh my God!
Into the back of the police station lot, where he was met by a furious sergeant who immediately said, "You're the guy from the Guinness commercial," and everyone else was like, "No, he's the guy from Blade Runner."
Sounds like
everyone expected him to go get dressed, and he just jumped on the bike and just roared off.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a super chat question. Blade Runner will forever be a masterpiece of sci-fi gold. Rutger's performance is amazing. The film sparked my interest in Philip K. Dick, as it did for me, because that's when I started collecting everything he wrote. Everything.
Yeah.
Well,
I was a nut.
I'm glad, you know, I'm always glad that one moment of, you know, brilliance will like pop off other parts of your brain and your heart, so that you go and you follow other things. You start to follow the trail, because the trail, there's all these different branching pathways, you know, and you never know what you can discover out there in the underbrush.
Well, the thing with like Philip K. Dick in particular was, and I'm curious what your thought is on this, because, you know, he suffered from mental illness, and I always got that from his writing.
Stop. Why do you say that?
Because I watched that interview with him and talking about it in a History Channel.
Well, you know, I knew Phil for 10 years, and so ask me if I think he suffered.
Well, that's what I'm going for. Is I wanted to know, what was your take on all of that with him?
I think that Phil was a brilliant, damaged man who had early in his life had a very unhappy childhood, and extremely sensitive, and in a sense what we now call unsocialized. And so he lived in his head a lot, and his personal life is his personal life. I won't talk about that. But he was the most brilliant, and he was an incredible, the verbal gymnastics that he could do with no effort whatsoever. I've never met in my entire life of working with many different people and interviewing many different people, someone who was articulate as he was, so effortlessly articulate. He was very articulate, very well read, an autodidact. Everything he knew by himself. And most of the time, he was just a guy. He was just a very smart guy who was he had a lot of energy, you know, a lot of energy. And he loved thought, and he loved exploration. And as his life progressed, and he had the pink beam moment, you know, that everyone knows about Phil Dick, that opened up a whole different thing to him. But he was also very down to earth, because I said, Phil, you made such a big deal over the years about, you know, this moment when you saw this pink beam of light, and suddenly, you know, this other century of the past is super. And I said, but that's the same day that you know, got a wisdom tooth extracted. He goes, yeah, maybe I was high, you know. But he said that seriously, because he had been. He'd been given, you know, painkillers. And so he was not, I have a degree in psychology. and I have a degree in English literature. And I would not, let's just put it this way. It's a very complicated subject when you talk about Philip K. Dick. But as a person, he was very warm. He was very funny. He loved to talk. He loved to just sit down and go. We'd go into these bullshit sessions that would last for hours. You would just talk and talk and talk and talk, And it's just a fascinating man.
Well, I love the themes in his books.
What I find the most interesting about him over the years is how he has kind of become mythologized. Because I knew the flesh and blood person, not as well as, for instance, his wives or his children or anything like that. I would never say or assume that. But I knew a certain aspect of Philip K. Dick as a person. And now to watch that morph into this, world-class known mystic, it kind of makes me chuckle, because I didn't see any third eye on Philip K. Dick's forehead.
Yeah, I've never bought any of that stuff either. But the thing I was always curious about, because
Ian, I'm sorry, Ian. What did you say?
No, his son did a lovely documentary about him a few years back. It's worth watching. It's a really nice tribute.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. And he did have nervous breakdowns. Those are well documented, But he was a highly sensitive guy. I mean, there are a lot of artists who have had nervous breakdowns. Are they all crazy?
But what I was wanting to get to is I love that many of the themes in his stories were, am I who I think I am?
Oh yeah.
Is this the real world?
Is this real? What I'm experiencing? And it was always questioning. His science fiction was surrounded by questions of, am I who I think I am? Is this what I think it is?
Mm-hmm. Working in a library.
Oh, and are these memories mine?
I love directing people to his writing. Somebody comes in and they say, I'd like to see a movie. I grab Blade Runner. I show it to them and say, watch this. If you haven't seen it already, watch this. If you've seen it before, watch it again. And then the amount of people who come in then and say, do you have his books? And they're talking about Philip K. Dick, and they're looking for books.
I was on one of the social media platforms yesterday, in fact, and someone was saying that they had seen Blade Runner and then read years later Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and didn't like it and didn't understand why Dick was such a big deal. And I said, in response, have you read Ubik or The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch? Go with those two books, or go with some of the short stories of the.
There's one of them. Help me remember this one. It's a story about a guy who is in a world that was created for him, in an actual post-apocalyptic world outside of it. But he lives in this world where he solves puzzles for money. But in reality, the code that he's uncoding through that puzzle is stopping the rockets from Mars landing.
Oh, right.
And his memories are, it's like 1960, and Eisenhower's still president, and Marilyn Monroe is the biggest star. And I love that story, that book.
Yeah.
Do you remember it?
It sounds a bit like Paycheck, but it's not. Paycheck is a short story, But speaking of Marilyn Monroe, you've heard that Netflix is squirmy about releasing the Marilyn Monroe biopic. That's supposed
got
to
a higher rating.
Well, because apparently it's awfully graphic, and which
I think it's disrespectful. They shouldn't do that. We got that $5 super chat, so I've got to give him a thank you real quick, and I'm going to use Blade Runner.
Oh, thank you.
Because this is a Blade Runner show. So I'm going to do one of my favorite clips.
You're reading a magazine. You come across a full-page nude photo of a girl.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
There you go. Thank you, King.
And that, speaking of Philip K. Dick, that line's right from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
There are lots of little things that are in the film that were from the book. I think the only thing I regret, but they ended up putting it in the game back in '97 with Westwood, which is where he discovers that the other police station that's populated by replicants. They're fake cops.
And they say you're a replicant, Deckard.
Yeah.
That's
Ersatz cops, as he. God, I love that book so much. But yeah, we have hit the 2-hour mark for the show, and I want to thank you for being here, Paul. God,
hey, no problem.
We it's such a blessing having you in our life, and we are very grateful. And Ian, thanks for showing up, even though it's middle of the night day there in Scotland. The sun never really sets. Nathan, fuck you, man. I love you.
We should do another Blade Zone something and go back through where it started and the weird things you guys came across.
I think we should dedicate a 2-hour show just to talking about all of this stuff. I absolutely agree with you. And Gary, once again, thank you. And by the way, Paul, which one of you is older? You know what I'm going for. Who is the oldest Blade Runner fan? Because you claim being a true fan.
Cue the crickets.
Cue the crickets. Fuck you, Gary. I ain't saying shit. But thanks for being on there, Paul. Gary, thanks again, man. It's first time having you on our show, buddy. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for asking me to come on.
Say one thing? Thank you, Paul, but thank you guys for Blade Zone. As a fan, thank you for Blade Zone.
This is why we should follow up with something
hey guys,
bigger.
Go ahead. Don't leave yet. Stick around. We'll talk for a few more minutes after the show, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the show. I want to thank the chat. What a great chat today. Wow.
See you.
Fucking incredible. But I am going. Who just left?
Gary.
Oh, Gary left.
Gary.
Oh. So I wanted to talk to him some more. Anyway, we're going to end the show now, and I want to thank everybody for being here. Paul, man, amazing. Ian, Nathan, and of course my partner in crime, Keith. And hey, everybody out there, get out for a launch. Show's over.